Whew. Hey, how are you? Hopefully you're doing better than I'm doing. It's been a bit of a struggle bus day. I got a text from my dad that got me worried, and conversation with the ex that got me salty. But I know being creative, or at least trying to be creative, helps me feel better. So I'm going to talk about the installations idea since it kept me up so late last night. And video earlier in a conversation. So I was having this conversation in Gromeyer's Discord about the need for, well, not the need, but the desire for NetEase to embrace cameras and allow players to have deployable installations, like forward installations. Basically, cameras that are sanctioned and allowed. And I would hope that these sorts of ideas would cost fuel and basically think of them think of a forward installation, which is what I'm going to call them. I'm sure there's better names for them. Outposts, but whatever. As stations that don't have timers. So they're no timer stations. They're, I think if NetEase limited one deployment per player, one deployment of a forward installation per player, it would be not too much additional server load. About 200 million ISK in value seems to be about the sweet spot for the strange toys that they want people to play with but don't want people to play with too much. Looking at you, rapid fire module and sniper module and bombing module, all those. But those restrictions, no timers, so you can go shield, armor, hull without any breaks in between. A really heavy and narrow limit to the damage that can be done to these bases. I'm talking 500 DPS max to draw out the value of that HP and to make small ships actually useful. If hunting forward installations in a small ship is your best bet, then there will be a PvP purpose for cruisers and below, is the goal. I also think that they should defend themselves. One of the things that I hate about hunting cameras is there's no guarantee of a fight. Most of the time, if I go slow boating to a camera in a Rifter or something stupid over the microwave drive, that 1,000 kilometers takes a hot minute, and if nobody shows up to play, then I'm not going to destroy the camera. I'll save a bookmark and then come back with something I want to put a kill mark on just for, giggles, whether it's hunting with a venture or something stupid like that. But I'm not gonna reward a lack of play with, engagement, or I'm not gonna kill something that doesn't fight back. Stations should fight back, not player-owned stations. Obviously they have the tools to fight back, but players aren't present to do it because of the timer system, especially when they're fighting battleships. What good's a station missile gonna do to a friggin' Marzio? Pointless. I think forward installations should be able to defend themselves with fuel. And I'm talking, so there's 4 different kinds, one for each Empire faction. Moar should be resistances and drones, with Caldari being repair and drones, potentially repairing shields. I don't know. I do know that there should be, I believe that these sort of forward installations should be weaker than a normal base, not terribly weaker. They should take about 45 minutes on average to kill. For a solo player, it should take about 45 minutes to an hour to knock on someone's door and be like, hey, you gonna defend your stuff? Are you there, bud? And if they lose it, it shouldn't be a big deal. It's 200 million ISK. That's 10 for freedoms on a bad day. That's nothing. Also, let's see, one for each faction with kind of a focus on repairing versus resistances as the delineator. Though you could tailor it to how it's armor versus shields and just standardize whether they repair. Make them consistent and make upgrading them not really feasible, because I feel like they should serve different purposes. And like same basic hull for each of these installations, these forward operating installations, but different modules for different effects. And I came up with 10 different expectations for them. So best targeted by smaller vessels with weak, I've got my notes, sorry. Smaller vessels, they're built to survive for a good time, not a long time. Build them using existing station parts. This is important. So industry has more pull and draw, but keep them solo friendly. Like I don't think a corporation should have to build, a little ramshackle space base out in the middle of nowhere. Capsule air outposts, they host ships. It makes sense. But these little outposts, these little stations shouldn't host capsuleer ships. They should have attached and internal, like a limit of 5 small ships within them. And the ships within them augment and fuel different effects. So obviously the gate camera should, be accessible by anybody in the corporation. They should be able to go to an option in one of the stations, in any civilian station, and take a look at the cam, see what's going on at that gate or wherever it's located. And based on the fuel usage and the special frigates docked in that outpost, or whatever you want to call it, it should report traffic on a system over time. These should probably be Omega only, since that seems to be the way NetEase is aiming their passive play. Like if folks aren't playing, then they should be paying. I'm down with that. I think that's cool. I think that's fair. What I'm not a fan of is how hard it is to interact with folks who play passively. Like you can give radders a hard time by showing up in a high-sec island and like watching them run away because the AI is afraid of a rifter or whatever. Usually a breacher, because I can put a red scanner on that and go torture battleships for fun and pleasure. But like passive play isn't something to be feared. It's something to be embraced, especially if folks are spending the Omega on it. So the gate camera is kind of like that's the premier idea. That's the first one. And for each of these, there's the basic function, which is, the camera, and then an advanced function, which costs fuel and ships. And small ships, the fuel in the ships, those are really only there to give incentive to blowing these guys up, like to making them a target. What goes into these outposts does not come out unless you destroy those outposts. So tearing it down, it's a sacrifice of the fuel in the ship, which generates demand, but it's for effect. So I figure special frigates would be good since they're really cheap. Nobody's going to feel too bad about a rifter, and it makes sense for a frigate to be on scout duty, living out of that outpost. Second idea would be a mining outpost, and I think I talked about this elsewhere. And that would do the same thing with ventures and retrievers. It would send a little ship out, randomly gather ore, and then bring it back. Or if it's a retriever, send a ship out, gather ore, bring it back. And that's potent enough in its own right to deserve fuel, in my opinion. The ship and the fuel, actually sending the ship and having that gather. I think just having them passively generate or gather minerals, or not minerals, maybe minerals. Minerals would be great. Just a straight delivery, would be enough for a mining outpost. They shouldn't be like... These should be generators of content in and of themselves. They shouldn't just, I saw this meme a while back about a dude who kept getting cats for his kid. Lived out in Arizona, and he'd bring the cats home, and inevitably the cat would get out and a coyote would eat it. And by the 5th time, they were like, okay, but are you giving your kid pet cats, or do you have a pet coyote? I feel like these should not be, they shouldn't just feed hulls for content. They should be targets in and of themselves with the addition. If you want to spring for that extra, you should be able to pay for it with fuel and hulls. So gate camera, mining outpost, a militia post, which would gamble various ships for items based on local security level. Whether it actually sends those ships out or has them as defenders, like has the ship deploy and defend the station itself, I think it'd be fun to explore. Having it defend itself with the actual vessel would be really cool, like fuel and hull expenditure. And I'm not talking modules or anything like that granular. Though it'd be really cool if we could like fit our own defenders, fit these ships. It's not necessary. Really, all you need to generate content is a risk. And having these forward installations out there as sort of like flags planted, like, hey, don't mess with this, or like, come get it, that's risk enough. And like, folks don't like risk. Folks are risk averse, even though risk is where the fun comes from. Like, if you ain't losing, you ain't trying. And like, just saying that makes me feel better after all of the stuff from today and yesterday and this week. But yeah. So, gate camera, mining post, militia post, a terraforming hub. Now, one of the real complaints that I have with the delineation between alpha and omega is alphas don't have a way to interact with planetary materials. Like, we can steal what omegas leave unattended, but most omegas don't do that. The only folks who are just pouring heavy water, which is great. Like, those guys are heroes. And if you're focused on planetary and you're pumping heavy water out into the space, thank you. Like, I love finding those fountains and coming back for more. Trupa Gaming, if I remember right, had a bunch that I stumbled across out in the Ethereum Reach, and I think he took them down and moved them somewhere else. But there's a few others that I stumble across in my usual routes, and it's just kind of like nice. But a terraforming hub would be sort of a planetary material strip miner using utility frigates, so think probes, think herons, that sort of thing. And then fuel would add lunar materials. And it's just a slow rate of return on investment. But having those deployed, and remember, so this is a target for alphas to hit, but omegas to defend, these forward installations. And having a terraforming hub out there to sort of supplement, ideally, an individual player could potentially supplement, but multiple players within a corporation could, each have their own farmed up and all in a little cluster for defense. Like, there's a lot of potential there for planetary materials to be on the line, to be gankable, to pull them. So a terraforming hub, that's another idea. Gate camera, mining outpost, militia post, terraforming hub, scrapyard. Turns any unwanted ships into condensed scrap. And I'm talking any ship. And the amounts of scrap return are random. Condensed scrap as well. And like, you could pump fuel in to increase the odds of getting condensed scrap, but really you're paying penny slots. You're playing penny slots with a scrapyard. Most of my Iskin game, like back when I was first starting out in Eve Echoes, was through reprocessing scrap. And like, the markets learned very quickly how to measure the value of scrap based off of the tritanium markets, but they haven't learned to measure the value of individual hulls or ships. Like, folks really kind of gave up on industry, and for good reason. It's not like there's any demand. The level of demand is below the value to create most of the ships, below TX7. So having a scrapyard as an option should just be a good a good means of pulling ships from the economy, which will increase demand over time. It converts them at a lower rate than like a one-to-one reprocessing, but it's supposed to be a gamble. It's penny slots. It's supposed to be, and there should be opportunity for, other resources potentially in there with fuel. I mean, I could see module resources, especially the blue rigging resources. The blue rigging resources, the ones that are used for those fancy rigs where you combine them, whatever they're called. I can't remember off the top of my head, but the ones that alphas can sell really well but can't use. Yeah, being able to gather more of those resources, because there's a lot of demand but not a lot of supply for that particular area, and there ain't much way to control that other than to go exploring, which, cool. I'm glad the value of exploring is bumped by the limited access to those resources, but I want more content, not just more farming. Which is ironic, because like placing these out there kind of feels a bit like planting seeds, and hoping, to grow fights. Anyway, gate camera, mining outpost, militia post, terraforming hub, scrapyard, and explorer's outpost. Now, this would function as sort of like a blue scanner, and this is something I talk about in the book a lot more, is the desire for small ship content. And most small ship content exists within condensed spaces. I would like more miners to go get that 1,000% bonus with me with their small ships. A lot fewer condensed spaces around Orion. Thank you, strangers. AX3, I think, is the alliance. The Corp, I think, is ENGR. Those guys are dope. I like them a lot. Haven't run into them in the wild other than, in HiSec, but good neighbors. But an explorer's outpost, the way I see it, would be a blue scanner for generating small ship content, compressed space within the constellation, not necessarily within the same system. And those would use destroyers, since destroyers are really good explorers, other than specialized frigate explorers. Those are the best. But destroyers are good all-arounders. And, if you're just going to have someone posted up, checking in, scanning routinely, you're probably not going to have something fancy out there in the wild, especially if it's disposable. People shouldn't be disposable, but hulls, yeah, we need the demand in the game. So, yeah. And then the flip side to that would be a patrol station, and I view that as sort of a red scanner that uses fuel for wrecks and boxes. It takes in cruisers, and its basic function is to notice when other forward stations are deployed in system. If the boxes thing is bad, you could increase the detection radius to a daily constellation report. Something happened in this constellation, you probably want to go look for other forward installations. Most folks probably won't be using those too heavily. The idea is more to give counterplay within the system. Because, the answer in any well-designed game, well-balanced game, is always it depends, right? So, rock, paper, scissors, are you going to throw rock or, paper or scissors? The answer should be it depends. What do you think your opponent's going to throw? That's balanced, but it's not necessarily fun, especially when the ideal strategy is random. Just throw whatever randomly comes up, which is really hard to do for humans, but going off on a tangent. The main thing is any module introduced to a system should have a restraining element nascent to the module. This is key to robust first design. I don't know if I've ranted on here yet about the work of Dave Ackley out of the University of Arizona, but the guy's basically a genius. His movable feast machine is amazing, and most of the principles applied there should be applied in software design and engineering as well. But they're not, which means the AI crash is going to suck because folks don't realize that AI only has the intelligence of an insect tops, potentially. And bugs are really smart at very specific tasks, but if you try and get them to generalize, it's really tough. They can generalize further, and the bigger the bug, the more generalization you get, but it's not the same sort of mental faculties or cognitive tetherability that comes from having a body and comes from having a robust first design. Oscillation between extremes. Not extremes, but oscillation between modes, states. AI doesn't really... golly, I'm ranting. That's the trouble with rough days. It's harder to focus. But yeah. I covered so far gate camera, mining outpost, militia post, terraforming hub, scrapyard, explorer's outpost, patrol station, smuggler's den. This is something I talk about. I didn't have the same mechanical concept in mind in the book, but one of the things that NetEase could really do to support small ship content if they wanted, while still raking in cash, because this would support large ship content as well, is allowing for programmable routes. So we have bookmarks and autopilot between those bookmarks, but you can't really run bookmarks in sequence. Let's say you're a smuggler. Hi. Trying to pull stuff out of dangerous territory, whether that's, Serpentis at Prime or the Ethereum Reach or any other gate camp hostile territory where there's folks who don't want anybody to pass. Being able to set routes and autopilot around certain choke points would be amazing. It would eliminate the need to play, which, like, bad. I don't like that. However, if there's a degree of vulnerability present in the elimination of that need to play, like a smuggler's den, which I view as sort of a dead drop location with transports and fuel, of course, as the effect of that forward operating station, fob, whatever. If you put goods into the hopper and then hit go, and one of those little transports, whether it's I believe they should be delivery system transports to give more need for, not the Nereus, is it the Nereus line? Yeah, the Nereus line and then the Amicus High Mobility. Those ships need use outside of the delivery system just to get more demand there, because they're really good. Folks don't think they're really good because you got to pay every time you use them, and everybody is loss averse. It's human nature. Anyway, if you drop goods, whether they're rocks, gas, whatever you want to move, and one of the transports takes those goods and moves it to another smuggler's den or civilian station in the line, what you can do is create automated supply lines. At the cost of fuel per trip to box the goods at a discounted rate because delivery system. But you box those goods, and on the distant end, if they make it, they're automatically unboxed. If they're killed en route, bummer. More crates out there for people to take advantage of. Pirates, whatever. Point being able to route around choke points, to zigzag around areas of hotly contested space, or to jump behind and off to the side of a gate camp and then jump back to the gate. Those are all extremely powerful tools that the only people who use those are the folks who are actively playing, which, good on them, but the folks who actively use bookmarks aggressively. And like being able to plant flags and say, all right, here's a forward operating station. If you can scan it down, you can come fight it. But it's a step along a route. I think that would get more people thinking sequentially and process from a process management perspective. So really slow Factorio is what I'm looking for here. And then I've got 2 more ideas. So the 8 so far: Smuggler's Den, Patrol Station, Explorer's Outpost, Scrapyard, Terraforming Hub, Militia, Mining, Gate Camera. The other 2, an Insurgent Cell and just a Communications Relay. The Insurgent Cell would weaken local SOBs over time, so player-owned stations. Also corporation outposts. Also like any sort of like heavy timer-focused station. These insurgent cells would weaken local SOBs over time, removing their timers, making them as vulnerable as any forward installation. It should take more than a week minimum, with fuel removing armor timer sooner. So you've got, for a player-owned station, you've got the shield timer, the armor timer, and the hull timer, right? You pop the shield, you got to wait a day before you can come back and pop the armor. And then you got to wait however long until you come back at a time of the enemy's choosing, which, cool, to try and pop the hull. And for most player-owned stations, you can actually do that solo, and it really doesn't take much investment. I've done it in Stabbers. It took 4 hours, but like that's passive play. I didn't have to watch. It's a burner Stabber. They're like 20 million ESC each. But you can do that with anything. Like I could have done it with a Rifter and just had it like plinking away all day until someone came and put me out of my misery. But if you could get rid of that timer through investment, having a vulnerable target behind enemy lines that they don't notice, there should be some sort of indicator like, a red scan, patrol your territory, but they don't notice until either they get a notification saying, hey, the armor timer is eliminated. Insurgents or rebels have messed with, some sort of story-based notice. keep your space clean, I think that'd be good for generating content and actually getting folks to play. So here's how like passive content can promote active play. With the presentation of targets, you'll have more need for small ships, destroyers and the like, to actually come through. Like in a real world context, navies depend on their destroyers. Patrol boats and folks actually in the wild doing things, like that's the whole of a navy's purpose, to basically protect civilians would be the dream. That's the goal. But that's not necessarily how these things pan out. With the introduction of new technology, folks tend to rely on satellite imaging, which is not nearly as effective as boots, not necessarily boots on the ground, but people in the field, folks who gather that experience through exposure. Satellites are great, like they can do a lot of really cool stuff, but unless you're willing to drop rods from God on a cruiser or smaller, you're stuck there, watching the Strait of Hormuz get blocked by really cheap mining ships. Yeah, insurgency would be really helpful for dealing with oligarchy. Anyway, a communications relay would literally just be an ISK farm. So it's just a little station out there. You spend fuel to generate ISK at a random rate. You get different amounts per day, but fuel increases that by a degree to make it profitable. And so long as that installation stays alive long enough, it'll become profitable, assuming it lives long enough. I don't know what kind of ships to plug into there for a communications relay. I would assume some sort of maintenance craft, Logi, but it's hard to say, especially since NetEase pulled a lot of the smaller Logi from the game because nobody was using it. And maybe eventually they'll pull more of the small ships because there's really no purpose to them other than, the grind up to battleship territory, which they're trying to get people to pay their way around. Like when you're actively, I don't know. They should have more risk and reasons to spend money other than avoiding gameplay. More toys that you get for going Omega that alphas have to, not necessarily have to, but can interact with. Because you're not going to go toe-to-toe with a battleship in a frigate unless you've got backup coming. Or a whale in your own right. Anyway, those 10, that's the I feel a lot better for having talked about that, especially after kept me up thinking of the 10. So communications relay, insurgent cell, smuggler's den, which is my favorite of the bunch, a patrol station, which is just a red scanner for others, explorer's outpost, more exploration content, condensed spaces with small ships is what I was thinking of there, something for miners to go defend themselves in, or condensed spaces that randomly have small ships generated. So if you don't have drones, even civilian drones, you boned. Just something to spice up, condensed mining and make it more interesting. I have a point that I want to talk about in another video about how to make mining more active, and I talk about that a lot more in the book, so that one's on the back burner because I've already written about it. Anyway, those are the 10. Mining, militia, terraforming, scrapyard, gate camera. And they don't have to be individual stations. They don't have to be specialized. You can use one hull with a different module for each to customize them. And you just install them like you would a normal POS. Maybe they count towards the limit in a system, maybe not. I don't know. Whatever server backend requirements generate different needs. But more targets means more shooting. And it's really silly how angry people get about passive players while at the same time spending a lot of money to be a passive player. A lot of whales will rail against bots and bot miners and things like that, while just using AI in their battleship, having it go to a high-sec island as if that's any better, just because they paid NetEase for it instead of, jerry-rigging it with BlueStacks or something. NetEase has the right idea. Embrace passive play, but they need to take it one step further and have passive play interact with active play. And once you've got those risks back and forth, that economy of action, I feel like Eve Echoes can be something truly special. Like Eve Online has a lot of that already in place. Just the nature of the game, nature of the beast. Eve Echoes could do something similar. And while we're dreaming, maybe they'll fix war games and I can actually, fight frigates with frigates. Anyway, thank you. I hope you have a good day. I feel a lot better for having gotten a rant about that. Hopefully it wasn't too much to endure. Yeah. Have a good one.